incredible. Oh. Oh. Hey.
Hello and welcome back to my Let's Play of Persona 5 New Game Plus. You can probably tell from the insane length of this video that stuff is going down, and that stuff is that we are finally going to get the chance to enter Kamoshida's Palace. And before we do that, we're going to do a little bit of preparation. There's a few more things that we need to do. Indeed, buying some, and because we, earned the money by doing, working, that's going to mean that we can actually clean up a lot of the places that we couldn't buy some stuff, and actually finish off purchasing our resources that we're going to be using up throughout this palace run. Now, the palace itself is, so the way the palaces work is in most of them, you will go through them, you will have the opportunity to, the main aim is to get to the treasure at the end of the palace, as has been discussed multiple times. Once you get to the treasure, you then need to send a calling card, and only then after that, and exactly the day after that, will you then be able to go into the palace, to enter the palace, and take on the boss at the end, as you can imagine, and finally steal that particular character's heart, as the game likes tell us about. So, and the important thing as well to note about these days is that any day that you enter the metaverse, so be that a palace or later on there's a dungeon that also counts, you are limited in some ways because you can't do anything in the evening after going to the metaverse. Because going to the metaverse is especially exhausting, as everyone makes out the first sort of time that they go into the metaverse. And so what this means is that you want to limit the days you go into the metaverse, especially early on, because obviously you'll want to be using those days for useful activities, to build up your social stats, to build up your confidant links. And instead, you're going to need to spend that time doing, just wasting time by going into, by not being able to do anything else. And that can be a bit of a pain. But instead, as we're about to make our first step and actually head over to the, I believe we're about to head up to the rooftop. So that is something that we need to keep in mind. We can't just continually keep coming back to the metaverse over and over again, because if you do that, you'll very quickly run out of time.
Hey. Listen up. Now then.
Damn it.
Let's start the strategy meeting. Meeting adjourned. Okay, let's go.
But damn!
What's up?
Nothing. I was just thinking we should choose a code name for you too.
A code name?
I'm Skull, he's Joker, and that's Mona.
Judging by your costume...
I mean, she's got that tail and stuff, so... What do you think?
Wait! Is that what you're going to call me from now on? I am so not down with this.
What do you want to be called then?
Something better than just a little cat. Maybe... Panther? That sounds pretty cool, doesn't it?
Huh? Why?
'Cause it sounds more... ferocious? She's a cougar. Don't call me that! More importantly, Kamoshida.
Oh, right. Let's go. All right, let's start fresh and get going.
It's game time from this point forward. I'll teach you guys the basics of infiltrating a palace as we go.
My master would like a word with you.
The prisoner has returned.
Well done. It seems you have remembered my words. You truly make it worth rehabilitating you. I am not attempting to withhold information from you. The essence of the rehabilitation that you must complete will be explained in due time. Once you encounter friends who share your aesthetics and discover your place in reality, only then will I explain it all. Such a day should not be far off. This time, I wish to introduce you to the aid we are providing. Due to your potential in wielding the power of the wild card, you can handle more than one persona. That power holds infinite possibilities. We will assist you in nurturing that potential. To that end, we must execute your persona. Do not be alarmed. Personas are personalities that exist within you. Thus, you will only be discarding old personalities to have them be reborn as new ones.
Select the skills you'd like to inherit.
Its power will be nothing unusual. Girls, let us begin. Ah, how impressive. A stronger persona has been born from the body and blood of the old. It shall be your new strength.
You better understand it at once. You'll end up dead if you don't master it.
Gather personas and bring them here. Gather a great many, execute them, and continue to give birth to even stronger personas. Developing your powers as such will play an integral role in the stand against ruin.
So that your rehabilitation goes well, we have a variety of rituals to choose in regard to executions.
And depending on the effort you put in, our master might consider further development of new rituals.
Cry your tears of joy, inmate.
Your heart is steadily gaining the strength of rebellion. It seems your rehabilitation is proceeding smoothly. A joyous fact indeed. In anticipation of this, I have prepared a gift for you. I hope that you shall accept it.
All right.
That is a thief's skill, allowing one to tap into their sixth sense and see what is hidden in the dark. I believe you can handle it now. May you continue devoting yourself to further rehabilitation.
Now then, if you have any requests, we will heed them.
So there we have it. We get a lot of information there from Eagle as we're introduced to another one of this game's really key characteristics and key sort of features. This idea of capturing personas and then using them to fuse and create other personas. What's really important is that you can't complete your persona compendium without doing fusions. There are just a whole list of persona that are not available unless you fuse them. You just can't access them by finding them in dungeons and capturing them that way. And that's part, so what part, as I've mentioned before, with regards to the type of playthrough this is going to be, we are going to be very much invested in chasing down these personas, looking at exactly which personas we want to keep going, as we're just going to explain why we register personas here. But yeah, we're going to be discussing exactly what personas we want to fuse and in what order, according to their sort of elemental type, I guess you could call it, if you were comparing it to another famous JRPG series. I have featured on this channel. But that's this idea that we have. I mentioned this in the previous, in one of the previous episodes. The reason, most times in that initial fusion, it's completely forced. You cannot not do the fusion, and a lot of the times you will be encouraged into fusing Arsene at this point. And I was obviously at this point I did not fuse Arsene, for the main reason as to what the persona that I wish to fuse Arsene into is going to come up later on. And so, some of the things that I'm going to be doing throughout this episode is doing little introductions to each of these persona and what they represent and that sort of stuff.
No slacking
as we're going to head back and get another little scene before starting the palace for real.
Something wrong? You were just standing around all of a sudden.
Why are you spacing out like that? It's kind of hard to tell what you're thinking sometimes.
Let's just say he's a man of high caliber. We're counting on you, Joker.
Hey. Let's go.
So we are here and we are heading back to one of the safe rooms, and the main reason that we're not fast forwarding at this point, because obviously we could fast travel straight there, but the main reason we're not at this point is because it gives us a good opportunity to use the third eye in order just to pick up a few items here and there. And picking up items is always a good thing. The items that you pick up from these, almost like the treasure drops within palaces, most of them are just things that you sell for lots and lots of money, but alternatively you can find items that, rather than selling, they might be relatively weak restoratives or stuff like that. So you could get healing items, that sort of thing, throughout these sort of palaces. And each palace has its own sort of list of palace-specific items that you only find within that palace. So you've already seen a couple there. You've seen like the dull swords. You'll only find dull swords in Kamoshida's palace. So we once again hit this room. We've been here a lot before, as we did a fair amount of grinding in this room. And again, you'll notice that these sort of the personas that are here, you know, there's like a set of bits into encounters that you could have, and it seems to choose relatively randomly as to which one you get. So our main plan, I mentioned before that I was going to talk about what my plan was for the palaces. Whilst it is more than possible to be able to complete the palace in one visit, it is also quite tough. It's generally very taxing on resources, and again, the main reason you want to do it is because you want to be able to utilize that time better in order for boosting your confidant links or your social skills. Because my social skills are maxed, I'm actually going to take a slightly different approach and largely focus on so one of the things that I was finding when I first played the game is that the actual balance between the social link confidant side and the dungeon crawling side was just a little off, because you always felt like you'd have a big block of dungeon and then a big block of social. And so what we're going to try and do in this playthrough is interlace them a bit more. It'll also mean that the dungeon episodes won't be horrendously long. This episode is already going to be horrendously long because the dungeons themselves are several hours of content. But in particular, here, the main idea is, I want to split up the dungeons a little bit more than what you might find in other playthroughs, especially those which concentrate on trying to get everything done in the dungeon in one go. So the main idea is that we're going to take 2 visits to every dungeon, 2 main visits that is. So we're going to try and get approximately halfway through the dungeon in the first visit, and then the second visit we'll do the second half. And this gives us a lot of benefits, because obviously we can restock in between visits, we can upgrade our weapons by selling all of our armor and getting more money. These are the sort of reasons why we might do something along these lines. So we're gonna do this battle. We do this battle just before, and then we're gonna enter the safe room, and Anna's gonna get her introduction to safe rooms. And something that's really nice that I've enjoyed seeing is that within each of the safe rooms, if you have a discussion with your teammates in each of the safe rooms, what you'll find is that each time it has a little comment on your progress so far, so sort of the progress that you make between the 2 safe rooms. And so we're going to be talking to our teammates as much as possible in order to hear all of those interactions and see exactly what they're talking about. And I think that is largely going to be it for now. So whilst we head into the safe room and have this, as I said, this little break, and then I'll come back and we can start talking a bit more about the personas that we're dealing with here.
Well?
Hey,
This is amazing!
What? You got it. Listen up. You got it.
whoa!
What are your thoughts?
Okay.
What are your thoughts?
Okay, let's go.
Come on.
So, after more advice, more sage wisdom from Morgana, it's time for us to, you know, properly attack this palace as we start to see a lot more new things going through. And so, one of the things that I would like to do is we're going to be talking a little bit about the personas that we're using. Each persona in the game has its own little background details that you can, as you see as I flick through the personas there, if I press L2 at any point, it gives you a little bit of background on each of the persona. And I think, you know, this little flavor text is always quite nice. It's quite interesting seeing where this game is taking a lot of its inspiration from in terms of, like, energy, in terms of, like, enemy designs and stuff like that. So we're going to sort of go through a lot about what's sort of spoken in these sort of things, and we'll also talk a little bit more about sort of the processes and our path through the game at this point, especially with regards to which elemental, again I use that word quite loosely here, but elemental lines of persona that we're going to be starting. But first of all, we should talk about the character's persona. So obviously, Joker, his persona is Arsene, which is, as we've seen before, largely bases around curse-type attacks. And interestingly, because it's curse, it means that he can never ever learn a physical-type move, which is quite an interesting quirk, at least for that particular persona. The description for Arsene says, is a being based off the main character of Maurice Leblanc's novels, Arsène Lupin, or Lupin, I guess. Maybe that's the same Lupin from, like, Castle of Cagliostro, or the the Lupin films. That, you know, relatively, pretty popular. But anyway, he appears everywhere and is a master of disguise. He is known to help law-abiding citizens. So obviously we have this idea of Joker in particular being this this sort of master thief. He is definitely the character that most embodies the master thief type of persona. I don't want to use the same word, persona, but you know, the master thief ideal that a lot of the game sort of revolves around. So then we have Ryuji. Ryuji's persona at the moment is called Captain Kid, and Ryuji is used primarily as a source of electric spells, so Zeo spells, but also Ryuji gives us some very powerful physical attacks, and he actually becomes one of the best physical attackers in the game later on. Captain Kidd, the description says, a 17th century privateer who eventually became a world-renowned pirate. At his execution, he declared he had a hidden treasure, leaving behind many legends. So again, another sort of person of infamy with some mystery behind it, you know. And again, going sort of for that pirate vibe. Quite interesting how that relates to Ryuji. I think it fits him pretty well overall. So then, if we go by sort of, I guess if we were going strictly by timeline, we'd have gone Morgana first. But we'll do Morgana now. Morgana's persona, as we're just going to get an introduction to sneak attacks and moving about the palace here. There's nothing really to worry too much about. There's a reason why you have all of these very conveniently placed chairs in all the hallways, and it's so that you can crouch behind and get lots of sneak attacks. Anyway, back to Morgana. Morgana's persona is Zorro, and obviously Zorro has been, has been prevalent in media before, but the history here says, a masked swordsman of justice who fought in California against corrupt officials during this era of Spanish rule. He always left his Z, or Z mark, with his rapier wherever he appeared. And we've already seen that Zorro, whenever he's casting like a Garu spell or a lot of other spells, he makes that sort of Z shape with the rapier that he holds. Finally, of our main four, we have Carmen, who is obviously Arn's persona. Carmen, the description, is a gypsy thief from the novel by Merimee, which became famous through the opera by Bizet. She is a femme fatale who is beautiful but very capricious. And I guess the idea there is that we're really looking at Anne's character, because a lot of her character is about her being able to feel a lot more comfortable within her sort of sexuality and being very confident within that. You get that sort of distinct. There's a strong thing that's not stressed too much during the game. You see a little bit with Joker, but it's quite difficult because obviously Joker doesn't talk an awful lot. But one of the things you get is this idea of that the main characters, whenever they're in their Phantom Thieves outfits, they, you know, take on these, they're not quite exactly the same people that you see in the day-to-day lives. They, you know, more embody these idealized sort of versions of themselves that they sort of, they wish themselves to be to some extent. And that's sort of what's being talked about there. Where, you know, Anne might see herself taking some of Carmen, you know, this character Carmen's traits on in order to feel, you know, maybe be a bit more confident or be able to utilize her beauty for her own regard and actually have it as her thing, you know, using it for her own agency as opposed to just being a target for other people. So we're just going to enter a new room.
How suspicious.
And the reason that I stop here is because it's the first of a few puzzles that you get within most of the palaces. Obviously, this is a very, very simple puzzle because we're in the first palace. The puzzles don't really stretch you too much at all, so I wouldn't worry too much about them. Yeah, I certainly wasn't worried about them when I was playing through the first time through. But yeah, so we have this sort of this idea that the Phantom Thieves, when they take on their outfits, when they put on their masks, they're sort of taking on more characteristics of these fictional characters that really sort of allow them to feel a lot more confident, or allow them to do some things that they wish that maybe they feel they could in reality. And I guess part of the game is sort of seeing them grow, not only as within their sort of Phantom Thieves personas in terms of like leveling up and stuff like that, but also growing outside of their Phantom Thieves personas as well. I think that's all part of what the game's going for. I might be completely off, but that's at least how I've read it from what I've seen so far.
Focus.
Okay, so we were on a roll with the personas. I didn't say it just then, but Morgana, again, I've mentioned this before, but Morgana's persona is largely based around using Garu or wind type spells, and then also healing. And then you've got Carmen, so Arn, who is largely looking at fire. type spells. And what's interesting is that she gets really powerful towards the end of the game, just like Ryuji. Both of them, those two, get moves that are especially useful towards the end of the game. So we might see sort of their usage filtering up a little bit, but you know, we'll see as we go through the game. It's all part of it as we go through. Okay, so we need to look at the other personas that Joker has as well. So obviously we have Arsene, and he is the sort of the start of the curse elemental. I'll use the word elemental throughout, so I think I'm just going to have to accept that it's not ideal, but they don't have a word for it in the game, I don't think, so we'll just use elemental. So Arsene is the start of the curse elemental line. He starts at level 1, and obviously he has the basic curse spell called Iha, and we'll try and take him forward as we move through, you know, through the other curse persona along the way. Now there are, so obviously we have 6 persona slots currently in our possession, and so the aim is to be able to start a line, to start an elemental line with each of those 6. So Arsene is Curse. Our second line is going to be the Fire Elemental line, which starts off with Jack-o'-lantern, which we've already seen before. And so Jack-o'-lantern has been is labelled as a drunkard who tricked the devil out of taking him to hell. When refused entry to heaven, he was forced to wander the earth with only an ember as a light. He's also a magician-based persona, which is not especially useful in the sense that we don't need to worry about interacting with Morgana in order to upgrade his social link, but it is useful in the sense that when we fuse magician type or personas of the magician arcana, we will get more experience for them and increase that, you know, quickly. So yeah, so we've got Jack-o'-lantern, which is based around fire, and we'll see how far we can take Jack-o'-lantern through. The third one that we have, that we've already been using before, is Incubus. Incubus is a male demon of European lore in medieval times. They visit sleeping women and have sexual intercourse with them. The resulting children become witches or wizards. They're kind of like the male comparison to the Succubus. But rather than a Succubus which preys on sleeping men, you get an Incubus which preys on sleeping women. And the Incubus is the start of, I think I mentioned this before as well, but Incubus is the start of the status ailment line, so a group of ones that really focus on delivering certain status ailments, and so a lot of what we'll be doing is trying to fit different status ailments and sort of almost cycle through different status ailments with these particular persona as we go through. The fourth type that we will be, or the fourth elemental that we'll be going through is the Wind Elemental. And Wind starts with Bicorn, which we've already seen multiple times. And so we have Bicorn starting off this line, and we even see another one of this sort of Wind Elemental line later on inside the palace. Bicorn is described as an evil creature with 2 curving horns. It represents impurity, unlike the unicorn. Said to be derived from Riem in the Bible, another legend says that it feeds off of disloyal husbands. And so, yeah, we have Bicorn, which will be starting off the Wind Elemental line. And then our fifth one, we won't talk about the sixth one because the sixth one really is only available in the second time that we visit the palace, because it's a slightly higher level, so we don't see it until later in the palace. But the final one that we have here, at least for now, is going to be Silky. And we've seen some of the Silkies around, although I don't think we've actually got one in our possession as a persona yet. And Silky starts off the healing line, We could have also fused Saki Mitama, which is also a healing-based persona.
A new safe room.
And so I'll just let the guys talk about the here in the safe room.
Well...
Hey.
What are your thoughts?
I'm on board.
What are your thoughts?
Let's go. Okay, let's go.
So as I was saying before that quick little interlude at the safe room, we have Silky, who again, we could have used Saki Mitama. They're both at the same level, so they both start at level 6, and they are both primarily based around healing. And healing is really useful, obviously, and we'll give them a huge amount of healing skills as we move through. So Silky is described as a fairy of England and Scotland. She carries out household chores while everyone sleeps and is a welcome spirit. It is said you can hear her silk skirt rustle as she works. And the reason that I chose Silky over Saki Mitama is because Saki Mitama is pretty much the first persona in the game, in terms of level, that you can't interact, that you just won't find inside the dungeon. And instead Saki Mitama needs to be fused. Whereas Silky is a persona which we do not need to fuse, because we can find one just wandering around with Kamoshidas. We've already seen some. So eventually I will use one as the mask, and then that will start off the healing line.
Okay.
There's a few other persona that are around. Pixie is one of them. Pixie is the start of the electric line. We'll talk more about this at another time, but some of them are a right pain to deal with at this point. Especially in terms of trying to get them to progress down their elemental lines, because I'm trying to keep it so that we're roughly going by level. But one of the important things is that you can't fuse every persona into every other persona. There are specific recipes, almost, to make different persona. And so, sometimes, so for example, Silky to Saki Mitama is a perfect example, where actually if I want to get to Saki Mitama from Silky, I need to go via a secondary persona already. And electric is just a real pain to fix. It's an absolute pain, and we'll talk about that when it comes to finally being able to start that line. So here we have a Berith. Beriths are incredibly useful for us, but they're very frustrating enemies to fight. They're only weak to ice, which you get from Silky, but if, as you, like me at this point, you haven't caught a Silky, they can be a real problem. They do an awful lot of damage with Cleave. And we were pretty lucky there that Arn managed to dodge that particular attack. Something that's very useful that I've just noticed is that you saw there that it said, I seized an exorcism water from the Berith. That's an example of something that I couldn't control, which is, so the game,
I can feel it.
At the end of the game, you can chat to all of your confidants, who you are at maximum level, so level 10 with them. And if you interact with them, you will get an item for them, and a potentially useful item. That's especially useful in the second playthrough. These items allow you to speed through, so you really don't need to worry about confidant links that are taking a while. You might notice that or at least you'll notice later on, that the Hierophant confidant link really slows down as soon as you're trying to hit level 3. And if you actually wanted to sort of get that confidant link moving, you really need to talk to Sojiro multiple times at level 2 just to get it to progress to level 3. I believe when you beat the game, if you did maximize that confidant link in the second playthrough, the idea is that you don't need to go through that extra step. Will pretty much every single level will be an opportunity to level up your confidant link, which is you know, a nice touch. The other thing is they also give you items which give you access to some of the things that their confidant link gives you access to right at the start of the game. And obviously, as I've said many times before, I did not maximize any confidant links in my first playthrough, and there's a reason for that, and that's because I was preparing for this playthrough in particular. I didn't want any of those extra bonuses because you get a lot of benefits from them. Instead, I chose, with that being said, there were some things I couldn't control, that mainly being that you automatically rank Morgana up all the way up to the end. And Morgana will always give you a scarf, Morgana's scarf, at the end of the game, and that is what you saw in the previous battle when I nicked that exorcism water. Morgana's scarf gives Joker a random opportunity to steal an item from an enemy when just attacking using a normal attack.
Okay.
And unfortunately, that's something that I just can't avoid getting. So it's just something that I've had to deal with and just continue on. It doesn't happen that often, which is very, very good. And to be honest, you're not usually using regular attacks that often anyway. So it's not the most useful thing to have at this point, and I'm pretty sure that it's not really going to affect the difficulty of this playthrough particularly much at all, which is what I want. I like the game being a challenge, and it certainly is a challenge. As I said before, those Bereths, especially at this point, they're level 9, and we're only level 7, so they're already significantly high level than us, and they do a pretty darn large amount of damage. Okay, so as we've sort of really been able to progress here, we're seeing throughout most of these battles, I'm, constantly making decisions as to whether I want to finish the enemies off and gain the most experience, whether I want to talk with them and gain their power. For example, I'm trying to do that with this agathion right here. Or whether I want to talk with them, get some money, or get an item from them. Each persona has a list of items that they can give out, including they include a rare item as well. And the rare items are frequently very, very good. In comparison, money gains, they start off pretty meager. You'll only get a couple hundred gil. It can be increased as you go on through the game by certain confidant links, so you can start earning a lot more money just by negotiating this persona. Obviously, in doing this, you are getting less experience at this point. And similarly, when you take a persona as a mask, it's a really, a lot of them are very useful ways of skipping hard battles. So once I have a Bereth, for example, I can then just negotiate with every Bereth. And rather than having to fight them, I can, miss out on a potentially very dangerous battle and instead get some items or try and take a relatively cheap way out. And that helps quite a lot in these, especially at these early stages of the game. So yeah, I'm pretty much making these decisions as we go along. You'll notice that I failed a bunch of negotiations. Pretty much I'm trying to put it such that every time I first interact with a persona or with an enemy that I'm trying to, use as a mask, I am trying to negotiate with them, just as you would need to if you're playing first time around. As you can see, the negotiations are pretty tricky. There are guidelines to the negotiations. You can learn the different personas' moods and all their sort of their behavior, and then judge which, try and make a decision as to which of the various options makes the most sense. But sometimes a lot of the options are just very, very weird. Like that last one with the agathion, I had no idea which one to choose. Chose one, and it didn't work out. Generally, you want the first one to, if your first choice, you want your first answer to either be the happy one where he gets the music notes, or the blue. Even the blue one usually works quite well, because the second time around, as long as you're getting the second one is the far more important one, where pretty much if you make them happy, you're almost guaranteed to take them on as a persona, unless you really messed up the first one.
This door won't open.
And if you mess up the first one, the last one, then quite often that will lead to the battle restarting. And actually, at this point in the game, the battles restarting are a real problem. The main point that you'll find throughout this game is that most of the time, what we want to be doing is ambushing enemies and finishing them off before they can attack us. Because if we let them attack us, they do an awful lot of damage. And that's just the nature of the game at this point in time. So at this point, I'm actually in a kind of annoying, kind of frustrating part of the game. I really want to get Pixie out of my party because I don't need Pixie. I'm not going to be leveling up Pixie anytime soon. The problem I have is that Pixie Zeo is exceptionally useful for starting off a lot of these battles, because we have a lot of enemies that are weak to electric at the start of this palace. And so I want to get rid of Pixie, but whenever you end the battle with a persona, you can't then swap the persona that you're currently wearing out. And that can be an absolute pain. So enemies like these Kelpies, which are, again, weak to electric, they would be useful to have, but, you know, we have this constant struggle in trying to drag, these things through. Trying to, make sure that we're doing the right thing every single time with regards to, the skills and, making sure that we have the right persona on us at a given time. But still, we're making pretty decent progress as we make our way through this opening palace. There are a few, obviously it's a tutorial palace, but that doesn't stop there being a pretty significant, increase in difficulty in certain parts. It's certainly not easy, and you can certainly start to see why I want to break this up into two, because we're having to use SP an awful lot for most of these battles. And without SP, a lot of these battles would be really quite difficult for us to fully take advantage of. As we continue to take down these persona, I think what I might do is start fast forwarding a little bit, sort of just turn up the rate a little bit. Because I don't have that much more to say until later on, especially when we hit the mini-boss of this section. So yeah, I think I'll start fast forwarding a little bit, and then we can talk about especially the mini-boss and anything else that comes up along the way.
Nice! Okay, let's go.
I'll reveal your true form.
I don't think you have any skills that'll hit his weakness.
Persona!
Get ready!
Wait! What the hell are you doing?
What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts?
Okay, let's go.
So, as we finish up in this safe room, we're actually going to head back to the start of the dungeon and to perform our first real fusion, or our first next level fusion. The reason we couldn't do this before is, as was mentioned by Igor right at the start when he introduced fusions, you can only fuse persona, at least at this point, up to your level. And that really limits which personas we can actually make at this point. So what we have here is I am going to finally fuse Arsene. And so I could have hypothetically grinded up to level 7 and then immediately fused Arsene. But at this point, we're going to fuse Arsene and we're going to make the next persona in the curse line. And that persona is Succubus. And the way we do that is we fuse Arsene with an agathion in order to get, this level 7 Succubus. We use the Succubus, you could also use the Silky there, but we'd much rather use agathion. And that's the reason why I took on that agathion, primarily just for this fusion. Obviously, being a curse type, we want to bring in as many curse type abilities as possible.
I am Arsene, the other you who exists within. Though I may disappear this moment, I shall always be at your side. We shall meet again when your fate reaches its conclusion.
So there we have our Succubus. Succubus are, or described as a female demon of European law in medieval times. They visit sleeping men and have sexual intercourse with them. The victims don't wake up, but they may dream of the encounter. And so that scene there with Arsene is the main thing that you get whenever, if we fuse Arsene. This is the sort of thing that happens.
These are the paths you have walked.
And so, you get that little scene, and it also is trying to allude to something that we're going to see way later in the game. And I really hope that we can get that, because the idea that we've taken our Arsene at this initial stage and then fused it all the way up would actually be really cool.
It is time, inmate.
So another thing that we saw just back then was, we really got an idea for the for some of the threat, at least, of these of the persona of the enemies that are around. The Kelpie that took out Arn, for example, again, they're only level 6. They're not that much higher. They're not even higher level than us, and yet they're still quite threatening. And we're going to get a similar, more similar battles, especially with the Barith. As we continue through, they just happen to be an absolute pain because we don't yet have Silky.
Show me your true form.
I believe we're going to soon get access to Silky, which will make the Barith suddenly a huge amount easier. And indeed, we will eventually fuse a Barith. So this battle here between, with the Silky involved as well as the Barith, is one where we sort of see some trouble. And so here we're going to actually use a baton pass, and primarily we're using the baton pass just to get that attack up. It's a really important thing that you get with the baton pass, but obviously you're always so focused on the you're always so focused on getting that extra turn with another character that you don't always think about the other stuff. So you don't always think about just the fact that you're going to be doing more damage anyway. So here we have the issue. Most of the persona, or most of the enemies certainly, are often very fast, and they're usually faster than us at this point. And that is, very frustrating at this point. It makes things quite difficult. Because it means that if we do let them have a turn, they often get an extra turn straight away afterwards, because just because of how the turn patterns work in this game. That being said, we're going to get through this battle even after Morgana. You saw though that we got a technical, or we got hit by a technical. The technical there is because Morgana was asleep. If you strike a sleeping enemy with any physical attack, you do technical damage.
Okay.
So you get that bonus damage on top of it. And it's something that I haven't really used nearly as much as I could have. You'll notice that in the previous, or in some of the previous Bereth battles, I've been relying on status to get through them. It's definitely something that I could do more, because, I don't know, I think the problem that you can have is that if you can get dispirited by not necessarily, yeah, especially if you miss a status move, it can be a real bummer with that at that point. So, you know, you really want to, you know, especially because then you've just lost an entire turn. But sometimes, and hopefully what I'm going to try and do throughout the rest of the game is actually be a bit more trusting that the status moves are going to hit and utilise them a lot more. Because I think there's a lot of cool strategies that you can do that manipulate the technical damage that you see in different parts of the game. Okay, so with that sort of discussion going on, I'm going to again fast forward for a little bit. I'm going to come up to the next little minor puzzle that the game has to offer with regards to unlocking the way forwards. It's pretty self-explanatory, so I don't think I really need to go through it. So unless there's something else that catches my eye, I think we'll largely just I'll leave it to it, and I'll talk to you when we get on to the mini-boss, which is actually a pretty difficult battle at this stage in the game.
Really? Cool, right? Okay. Cool, right?
Nice work, team!
Okay. Focus. It's somewhere. It's somewhere.
It's a shadow! Watch out, Joker!
I'll reveal your true form.
Now's our chance to strike! Go!
Persona. Succubus. All right. Persona! All right. Focus. No match for me. I have something. Focus. I can feel it. I can see it. It's somewhere. Shadow, what do you want to do, Joe? I'll reveal your true form.
Cool, Joker! Alright, I'm gonna pass the baton and follow up!
That's a kill! Serves you right.
Finish up!
That's all she wrote. Okay.
Didn't even break a sweat!
I see it. I see it. Focus. Hey, look!
Okay, let's go.
It's somewhere. It's somewhere. Show me your true form!
Now's our chance to strike! Go! Goro! It's almost scary how good I am! It's almost scary how good I am! It's almost scary how good I am! Don't move! This'll end it! There are 3 enemies! Get them! 2 enemies remaining! Don't let your guard down! So close to using it.
Really? Okay. Cool, right?
Nice work, team. I got a new power.
Okay.
How suspicious.
Focus. Focus. Okay, I see a shadow. I'll reveal your true form.
Now's our chance to strike. Go! Hit their weakness. It's all too easy. What's the matter? Out of the way! Persona! That's not it! You see that again, Panther? Persona! Come in! You see that again, Panther? Finish up! You pros have thorns.
All right. Piece of cake. Focus. Focus. I can feel it.
Treasure chest?
Well then.
Focus.
Oh!
Damn it.
Oh, yeah! Uh-huh.
I can feel it.
Is this...
What?
Thanks.
Okay.
I can feel it.
Hey, look at this!
All right. I can feel it.
So that's the solution to that particular puzzle, and we learn a bit more and see even more reason to hate Kamoshida at this point, and we really don't need any more excuse to really want to go and absolutely pulverize this guy. But beyond just saying that, there was something else that I realized that I would like to just bring to the attention at this point, and that is whenever we're negotiating with shadows, we're getting two options to appear. And the reason for that is that the top option is just the negotiation step, and the second option is only available if you've already got that shadow in your Persona Compendium. It's about when the shadow sort of says, "Oh, I recognize you in some way," whenever you're talking to them. And the idea of what's happening there is that once you've already interacted with the shadow and you've got them in your compendium, you don't need to negotiate them with them at all. There is absolutely no point in the negotiation. Indeed, it actively hurts you because there's always a chance that you will fail the negotiation. And so they give you this shortcut that allows you to bypass the interaction with the shadows, and that's actually really, really useful. And so I use it absolutely all the time whenever we're doing interactions for money or interactions for items, because frankly, I'm not going to risk, you know, the interaction, the chat, having the chat with the shadow, just because they can go wrong, and when they go wrong, it's often not good for us. And that's just something I wanted to mention as we are heading pretty swiftly towards the next mini-boss.
Focus. I have something.
This feeling.
This is a safe room. Well,
Hey,
oh. What are your thoughts?
hey.
What are your thoughts? Okay, let's go. Let's go.
It's somewhere. Focus.
Joker.
Damn it.
Yes!
So here we have it, the battle with the Heavenly Punisher. And what's interesting is that this is an enemy that will pop up once more in the future, primarily as just a regular enemy around the later parts of this dungeon. At that stage, he's level 16, and it's changed slightly because he actually does have a weakness at that stage, whereas currently he does not, and that makes him particularly dangerous to us because we can't really hit him with anything super effective unless we get a lucky crit. Now, as you saw, he can do an immense amount of damage because what he's doing is he's using the skill charge to boost the power of his attacks. And later on, we'll get the ability to do that, and it's really, really powerful, and it's going to be good fun. But we can't do that yet. And so here we're really introducing this main idea of being able to guard. And guarding is incredibly useful throughout the game. That being said, you really need to be careful with your health, at least at this point. Joker can still go down. I think I keep him at 117 here, and that is risky because even through guard, this guy can hit for well over 100 HP, and so you do need to be exceptionally careful throughout this battle. Later on, I'm pretty sure I heal just to be absolutely sure. Now, the mini-bosses throughout the game, with the exception of, in particular, the mini-bosses in the this somewhat optional dungeon that we'll talk about when we get to it. The mini-bosses are usually pretty resistant to most status, which makes these battles a bit more of a slog. They usually have a specific pattern that they want you to try and follow, and so that's, you know, we're going to pretty much obey that pattern for now. But yeah, pretty much if he attacks someone who isn't guarding, he's going to kill them. If he does, otherwise, you know, we're going to really struggle. Now, I finally get the right idea, and I use one of the many items that you can get throughout the game which actually affect your stats. And stat increases are stuff that, you know, obviously he's using it with charge. You can see the stat increase just under his name there, where it has his attack up twice. So it's going to show that, you know, his attacks are going to be exceptionally strong. But we can do, you know, we still have abilities to do that, maybe not through our persona, but we can do it through items. And boosting stats is exceptionally useful, as you can imagine, with most, you know, if you're familiar with any JRPG, then these sort of things are very, very common. So as I continue to heal, I think I realised that I really just want to get this battle over and done with. So the odd morsels that occasionally are the persona, their occasional item drops from different, you know, chats with specific persona, they're actually a pretty good item because it gives you a strong attack boost, whilst lowering evasion, but frankly you're going to be hit by a lot of attacks anyway. We see that a lot. So knowing that you can't really dodge an awful, like, ultimately I don't really trust dodging an awful lot. You'll notice that that attack did exactly the amount of HP that I had previously, so very glad I healed. But yeah, so with that in mind, it was very much a case of wanting to, you know, balance that out. And so yeah, we're going to be trying to wipe this guy out now with attacks because he's just charging up. And if I remember correctly, we get just enough to be absolutely terrified because we miss once, we miss twice, and obviously if we had given him an extra move, he would have killed us because he's already charged up and probably would have gone for Joker and always been over. But thankfully Morgana lands a Garou. We finish off that mini-boss. He's really not too hard, obviously it's just that back and forth. You can use things like those odd morsels or other items. Anything that boosts attack is really, really useful in that battle. You can't afford to lower your defense, and then you've just got to keep Joker's HP up. Now, after this battle, we're going to get ambushed by some shadows, and again, we're going to get sort of like the... So yeah, so there's a really important set of stuff there. Those guidelines that Morgana has just put are really, really useful and are really, really good to read. So, you know, it was something that I didn't do nearly as much as I probably, you know, throughout the first playthrough. I didn't do it nearly soon enough to actually get the full benefit. So we have a pretty tough battle here with two Barreths, and so I'm pretty sure I just realised that... So the other thing to really worry about this battle is obviously we don't have the ambush. So therefore we're just going on based on whose agility is higher, and inevitably the enemies generally will have pretty high agility relative to you, at least is what I've been finding so far. So you need to be really careful because they will likely outspeed and they will likely be able to deal a huge amount of damage. So rather than deal with that, we are going to use some foo-foo spells, and then we're going to... Pretty sure, yeah, we're just going to talk because we need to get out of here. And again, just like I was mentioning, we have the sort of the chats there. We chose the first one, and again, that means that we actually have to do the discussion. This is because I haven't negotiated with a Barreth before, and so I figured I should. And I'm just praying that I get the right choices here. I'm pretty sure I get the right... Ah, there we go. I get the right choices, and so it gives me an item. You'll notice there he's also talking about what happens if you interact with personas who are too strong for you. So occasionally, you know, might be going around a dungeon, and you might want, oh, that looks like a cool persona. I'll have a discussion with it, but then it will say you're too low level, and that's because you still can't hold on to personas just as you can't fuse personas that are above your level, you can't adopt personas that are above your level. So specifically, that Barroth, for example, is level 9, and we are, I think, level 7, level 8. So we still can't get, even if we wanted to, we didn't try to there, but even if we had wanted to, we wouldn't be able. So anyway, I think that is going to be it for this episode, because we've got roughly halfway through the palace. Most of these episodes are going to follow this sort of pattern of going to have something to talk about, introduce some personas, talk about exactly the pattern that we're taking through with regards to like the elemental pathways, and then once all that's done, we're just going to sort of zip through some of the other stuff, because ultimately I appreciate that these episodes are going to be really, really long, and you probably don't need to see every single battle.
Really?
But there we go. That is our first main trip to Kamoshida's Palace done. I hope you have enjoyed this episode, and I hope you will join me on the next. As Morgana says here, we are exhausted, we need to sleep. You pretty much have to sleep after going to the metaverse. So yeah, hope you have enjoyed it, and I hope to see you on the next episode.